Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Happy
June 1st.
Happy June 1st. Yes, we're back.
We're back. It's another Tuesday, and it's another opportunity to hang out with Sivani and Sabine.
That's right. That's right. And we finished the article clubs a couple of weeks ago. Last week, we ended up talking about books that we're reading. And today we're back to chat about something else.
Yes. Yes. And let's talk about, so for those of you who are hardcore Hidden Compass fans and are obsessed with our social media, thank you. You might have noticed that our contributors have videos that pop up in our social media, and some are really in-depth little discussions about what went into the reporting their pieces, and others are them talking about cranberries.
They're quirky.
Yes.
And we had fun way back when we decided to do this. We had fun coming up with these questions. And so we thought it's only fair that we also have to answer these questions.
This is true. If you write or photograph for Hidden Compass and you have a campaign, you have to answer all kinds of crazy questions and think about ethical dilemmas like these questions. And so, yes, what do the co-founders think about these things?
Yes. So I think the first question we ask, and one that I'm curious to hear your answer about, is what would you do with a time machine?
Are you curious to know my answer? Because you know I would totally freak out if this happened to me.
I mean, I have a sense that's what would happen. Yeah.
You know, I've been thinking about this ever since we have posed it to our contributors, and for the life of me, I mean, I just feel like there are so many horrible things that could happen if I use this time machine, but I also really want to know how it was built. If I had a time, first of all, do I stumble upon this thing? Has someone shown this to me? And if so,
yes,
that person and I need to have a long conversation. Am I sworn to secrecy about this? Is this a secret society of people who are using this time machine? And am I being indoctrinated? Am I ready for that? What are the ethics of this society? I kind of want to know how we built this thing, because I think we would learn so much about the state of the universe, about physics, about wormholes, although I'm not an engineer, so I'd have to find an engineer, a trustworthy engineer, to
I think you're
about my time machine.
You're avoiding the question at this point, though. Because the question isn't, would you figure out how it was made? Presumably, if it's made, we have a sense of how it was made. Let's just assume that this is technology that's been in development and now there's a time machine.
Well, obviously not a lot of people know about it if I'm the person who has access to this thing.
That's not in the question. No one says you're the only person who has access to a time machine. The question is, if you had access to a time machine, what would you do with it?
What would I do at the time?
I feel like I'm like I'm turning into defense attorney Sivani, and you're on the
I think you are.
I think I am.
It's a little intimidating, but probably good. What would I do? I don't know. This is really hard because I feel like who am I to decide what to change? So many horrible things that we've experienced as a species have been important for our development, even if they are horrific.
Yes.
I mean, as you can tell, I would probably do nothing. I would probably walk away. What would you do?
Oh,
would you do something?
I would destroy
it. Destroy it.
Yeah, like hands down, I would take that thing out. Nothing good can come of it. I've seen the movies. Nothing good can come of it.
Nothing good can come of it. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think I'm bumping up against the the fear of me destroying it is closing all these doors and opportunities. But maybe you know what? I'd probably just talk to you and be like, Siv, it happened. And the thing that we talked about confidentially and on Facebook Live and on YouTube has happened. And
yes,
maybe I would end up in an insane asylum and then helping contribute to great work of literature or a new dictionary. Who knows?
That's right.
That's a little what are those called? Like the eggs, the hidden eggs.
It's an Easter egg. It's only an Easter egg.
It's an Easter egg. But for those who were paying attention last week.
But is it an Easter egg if it comes after? I don't know. I don't know how this works.
I think it's, I think it is. I think it is.
This conversation is definitely
it's derailing. This is what happens when we start with a time machine. I mean, it's a different kind of conversation than our usual conversation about articles and books, because time machines they're a whole other thing. Okay. So time machine, Siv would kill it. Sabine would have a meltdown and go to Siv, who would convince her to destroy it. So I think we've both decided what to do with that.
Yes.
Okay. What's your favorite way to navigate, Siv?
So I have two. And the first one is by the stars. So this was something that I got to learn how to do a couple years ago and we did it on a sailing trip. We navigated from Key West, Florida to Bermuda, no GPS, only using the sun and the stars and celestial navigation, planets, all sorts of stuff. And it was both like a great exercise in sort of understanding how other people in a different time made their way all over the world. And also the kind of capacity and the knowledge that they had to have in order to do that. Because I think there's a tendency to think that in the modern world, right, we're more advanced and we're this and we're that. And in some ways, sure, like technology has given us things that previous, generations and previous civilizations didn't have. But at the same time, there's a lot that we've lost because of it. And so getting the opportunity to navigate more than 1,000 nautical miles using nothing but the stars and the sun, which is a star, but also the planets, which are not, was really, really a cool experience. And it was funny because when we left Key West, the itinerary was literally find Bermuda. Like that was it.
I love that. It's like a scavenger hunt.
Right. And it was also, it very much indulged the math nerd in me. So much of it was mathematics. And and we've talked about, and we also talked about it in the podcast, that I have an obsession with the night sky, and getting to connect with it, this thing that I've spent a lot of my career chasing around the world, and getting to connect with it in this way was just really a meaningful experience for me. So that's one.
Before I'm sensing that there's another way, but yes, before you get there, was it hard for you to learn how to navigate by starlight?
It was the hardest part about it for people, and like the people I was with, because we all learned how to do it for this trip. And the math was frustrating for people. But if you were someone who liked the math part of it, which I did, and there were a few other people who did, then it was certainly complicated, and we did it multiple times to make sure that we were correct. So a lot of redundancy, because you're learning to do it, and it's hard to trust that you're getting it right. So it wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard to learn if the math wasn't too hard. And as someone who has always loved math, I kind of relished that I got to do math in a way that I don't normally get to do in my normal life. And so there was that, but also, I mean, just like learning to use the sextant took some time, and getting comfortable with it, and how to calibrate it and do all of these things to make sure that the readings you're getting are accurate. So it was definitely a process. And pieces of it were harder than others. And also, for folks who aren't that familiar with the night sky, identifying things and that's also, if you grow up in a place where you see the night sky, but it's not a truly dark sky, when you get under a really dark sky, there are so many more stars. And so your bearings are lost a little bit. So that was, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But the second way I like to navigate is by the ridiculous maps that people draw for us sometimes when we're traveling. And so I have a picture of one. I don't know if it's gonna, there it is.
What?
That was the map.
What is that?
It's a map. It was a map to a sunrise location. And that is what I had. to like go out and try and find this spot to photograph sunrise in the dark, obviously, because it's pre-sunrise.
Right.
I've had so many of those occasions when I'm traveling and I'll talk to people who live in a place and ask them, what's their favorite spot? And inevitably I end up with these maps that are drawn on napkins and scraps of paper, and they're all similarly vague. I think when I posted that, I shared that on Facebook when I took that photo, the map, but also the photo that came out of it, because it was a spectacular spot. But a friend of mine responded, just like, you're kind of playing it fast and loose with the word map there, right? I mean, but they lead to some remarkable places. And so that's yeah, I like that, because it's not about the map, right? It's about the people that I get to talk to and the places that I get to see because I'm having conversations with people and connecting with people.
That reminds me of when I would ask for directions. So those of you who know me, you don't even have to know me that well to know that I spent 3 years of my life living in the Dominican Republic, and I often got lost and would have to ask for directions. And it was one of those things where I'd be in the middle of the countryside, and as a 6 foot tall white woman wandering out of farmland, the conversation didn't just have to do with the directions. It was, why are you here? What are you doing? And and so getting to talk to people and getting to know them, and I got to know, the more lost I would get, the more people I would meet, which I loved. And it was those kinds of directions that are kind of similar to your map, where they're like, well, you go to the hill that has the big tree on it, and then you circle around there, and then you'll see a stream, and then you cross the stream, and then, and you're like, okay, it's the hill with the tree. Right. You turn around, and of course there are 20 hills with 20 trees on them, and you're like, which one's the big one? So I love navigating that way. And then I think my favorite way to navigate is by the rapidly vanishing backside of an enthusiastic companion.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about the night in San Francisco when you and I were out with a mutual friend who, this was Halloween night, and she had a
former contributor, a mutual friend, also a former contributor, Allison Konecki.
Yes. So if you contribute to our magazine, you might get to run through the streets of San Francisco with us at 2 a.m. with a basket of fruit on your head on Halloween night. And that's the kind of way I love to navigate, is someone who's just, they're enthusiastic about where they're going. You might not know where you're going, and you have to keep up. But you just fully trust that wherever you're going to end up is somewhere spectacular.
Definitely. Those, that's a great one. It was a fun little, I remember just she knew where she was going. We didn't know, but but we followed, because that's what you do.
That is what you do.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
It is fun. And it is so much about navigating, we think about maps and GPS and about getting from point A to point B, but it's really about so much more than just getting to a specific place. It's, it's about the people, and it's about kind of the experiences that you have along the way.
Yes.
And often it's not the map itself, it's not the physical map that gets you somewhere, but it is these connections that we make with folks.
Or the place that you end up, my favorite is when I ask, how do I get here? And someone's like, you shouldn't go there, you should go there.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't go there. Maybe I should go to this other place. So,
yeah.
Love it. Why are you going there? Okay.
I think about also the places you end up when you are supposed to be on a particular track and you deviate from that for whatever reason, sometimes not knowingly, but you still end up in, because I'm thinking about us in Scotland and on our walk, and the people that we met at the end of that walk, because we were not where we were supposed to be.
Yes, this is when we walked across Scotland, which is a great country to walk across because the middle part is skinny.
Yes.
Question number 3, what's something surprising about where you live?
Yes. So
I'll go first because
you go first, because I went first on the last one. Yes.
So I live in this beautiful, like bucolic, gorgeous, sunny neighborhood in northern Berkeley with all these rock outcroppings and fancy homes. And I think the surprising thing about this area is that it used to be a refugee camp. After the 1906 earthquake, there were about 225,000 people who lost their homes in San Francisco. largely because of the Inferno fire that ravaged the city after the quake. And a lot of them came to the East Bay. Wow. And started populating. So Oakland and Berkeley weren't very populated at the time. And actually, a lot of the foundations of those cities happened because of refugees fleeing from San Francisco after the earthquake. And this area used to be covered in, a refugee settlement of sorts because it was open parkland. It actually was, Berkeley was being considered for the state capital of California. And this was all open space parkland and was going to be part of the Capitol grounds if we had gotten the Capitol, which obviously we didn't because it's in Sacramento.
Yeah.
So yeah, now it's this beautiful neighborhood, but once upon a time, it was refugees from the 1906 earthquake.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the clacking in the background is my dog.
Yeah. Winston.
He's just running around the house.
Yeah.
Happy.
Yes.
So Santa Barbara.
Yeah. Well, so one of the fascinating things about it, and if you have read previous issues of the magazine, last issue actually, you might recall Alex Krowiak's story about the Channel Islands, which are right off the coast of Santa Barbara in part. They string down south as well. But I always say that from my office, if it's clear, I can see the Channel Islands. And those Channel Islands are largely considered by some to be kind of the Galapagos of North America. So there's incredible biodiversity here, which is really, really neat. But so there's also a human history here that dates back thousands of years. And so it's believed that right now we're looking at roughly about 13,000 years of human history in this area, which is really cool. And not just, the Chumash, and you had others who came after, but it's human history. It's really rich human history. And the Channel Islands are cool because archaeologically it's preserved really spectacularly because of, and I remember speaking to when we were fact checking the story, and I was fact checking the story, I was speaking to a gentleman at the Natural History Museum and who's part of the research that happens out on the Channel Islands about the stratigraphic integrity of the Channel Islands and how so much of it is preserved because there are no burrowing animals and not really any burrowing insects. And so you have kind of these clear sedimentary layers, and so they can date things in a way that you might not be able to at other sites. So that's really cool. And then kind of a random fun fact is that it is home to what's believed to be the largest Ficus macrophylla tree. So fig tree. It's a fig tree. And at the Amtrak station, there is a fig tree that I guess produces about 21,000 square feet of shade.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Figs are amazing.
Aren't they?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I could talk forever about figs. Keep going.
Yeah, well, so this tree is there at the Amtrak station, has been there for quite some time, and it's very large and produces a lot of shade for people. So I thought that was kind of that's a fun little thing.
Are you familiar with strangler figs?
Yes.
I remember first learning about this, that these fig trees, that the seeds are picked up by birds, then travel and then through the droppings, these seeds germinate on top of other trees. And they snake their roots down to the ground, and then they cover them, like they mummify these other trees, and then they suffocate them.
Yes.
Which is so intense. And it looks so cool. I mean, you look at them and it's just so beautiful. All of these, intertwining root systems, and you're like, wow, this is like a cathedral of a fig tree, but it's really intense when you think about it. And over time, such a slow, methodical, evil thing. It's so beautiful at the same time.
Nature doing what nature does, as we like to say.
Figs, man, they're crazy.
Figs are amazing. Figs, I mean, fig trees in general are amazing. The fruiting fig trees that we all eat are also amazing because that's one of my favorites. And I grew up, my parents always had fruit trees. We always had fruit trees in the backyard growing up. And so figs right off the tree and that sort of thing. But all of these, my parents have like really green thumbs. They can grow, it seems like anything. And so we have these trees that have been there like 36, 37 years now. And they produce, and usually I end up with like bushels of things to deliver to other people because they're just too many for any one human or any humans, like one family of humans to consume.
I love the trees that you have or that we sometimes have in our backyards, and knowing the people who planted them. I mean, we have this beautiful Japanese maple that I can see from my office here that was planted by the father of the woman who lives next door to us.
Yeah.
And I just remember hanging out in our backyard one day and his eyes poking up over the fence and saying, "You see that tree?
Yeah.
I planted that." I was like, "That's amazing."
Right. I actually have a fun little guy in my backyard right now. I'll show you another picture from here.
Ooh, so, what is that?
It's a little palm tree. It's a little king palm. And it is the child tree of a parent tree that we planted in the house where I grew up when we first moved there. And it periodically like seeds and sprouts, and there are all these little palm trees all over the place. And so this one had planted itself deep in the shade and was still growing. And so we potted him, and I brought him down to my house and planted him in my backyard.
Oh my gosh, I love that. The generations of trees following the generations of babus.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is about languages. Yes. And so the question is, would you rather be able to speak every human language on the planet, or be able to speak to non-human animals?
Yes. Thank you for adding the non-human before that. I think the way that it's written for all of our contributors is be able to speak to animals, and of course humans are animals. So if you're fussy like I am, and you would just poke at that.
Well, and as we mentioned last week when we were talking about books and coyotes, humans often don't like to see themselves as part of that animal hierarchy and part of the animal kingdom. So yes.
Right. Yes. I would say human languages, in part because I've had a brief encounter with oral traditions that have been passed down for hundreds of generations. And so in a way, you can kind of learn about the animals that humans encounter all throughout the world right now, and animals that used to exist generations ago, sometimes hundreds of generations ago. So I would go with human languages, just to be able to capture the breadth of history and wisdom that has been passed down, and you can kind of get a 2-for-1 with that. So that'll be my answer to that question.
My answer is the other option, because people are overrated, frankly, which I think is generally how the two of us break down. I tend to think humans are a little overrated and less interesting than we think we are. And so I would want to be able to talk to non-human animals. I think about how much we could learn about their lives, and what, so much of the time we impart human consciousness onto other things, and we think about them as, oh, they're, do they have a language? What do they feel? What do they know? And we assume things based on our own perspective. But if we could actually communicate with them and understand them and what their lives are really like, and what their environments are like, and all of that, I think about how fascinating it would be to be able, to talk to birds and to snails and to all sorts of things that have these very, very different existences, not just from us, but from each other, and what we could learn that way.
That'd be really interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, I'm also thinking, why stop at non-human animals, but also the plant world? I mean, having read The Hidden Life of Trees, and of course the Overstory, and just getting this idea of communication between trees and these massive networks, and what we could learn about cooperation on that scale, and resource sharing and movement, and
well, and trees, also fungi. So I read a great book, and maybe we'll talk about it somewhere down the road, about fungi, and how involved they are in the communication between plants and in between other things, and the fungal networks that connect trees and things like that.
Along the root systems of all these different trees, and they're huge. Fungi are so cool.
I know I want to talk. I want to talk to all the things that aren't people is basically how this.
So I'm curious because one of the reasons that I use to back up my stance of wanting to speak to all humans was this passing of information down generations for Homo sapiens.
Yes.
Is that something that happens in the animal kingdom in a way that I have overlooked in my judgment?
I mean, I don't think we know. I think we do know that there's certain things that are evidence of some passing down of information between generations. We know there's that great study with the crows where these scientists wore masks and captured the crows and banded them, and then they released them. And from then on, when they wore the masks, they would get attacked by the crows. And that wasn't just the generation of crows that they had banded. It passed down through the generations. And we know that certain animals pass down information in some way. There is learned behavior. And so I don't think we know. And we know how
learned behavior though and learned knowledge are different things.
But there's no way for us to know. We don't know if that happens in the animal kingdom or not, which is kind of my point. I'd like to be able to have those conversations and find out.
There's also just the sheer numbers of this. I mean, if you think about the number of human languages that are still in existence, it's, several thousand, many of which are going extinct as we speak. But but, if you could speak to all of these species and not just in the animal kingdom, but looking everywhere else, I mean, that is overwhelming. All the different points of view.
Yeah, totally. And I think that humans are kind of a blip on the radar, and there are animals that, that predate us, and there are animals that will outlive us. And how fascinating would it be to be able to actually communicate with them and understand what they do know and what consciousness means to other species? Because we've spent so long, and I've talked about this before in one of the article clubs, or that period of time where we thought of animals as automata, that they basically were driven by these instincts and these needs and not really thinking. They were robots, essentially. And how much we are learning about what consciousness might mean when we stop trying to impart human consciousness onto animals and trees and other things, and understanding that they might have their own sense of, we're learning more about trees and how they communicate, and not just how they communicate, but how they influence the environments around them and how they manipulate the environments around them, and other animals that do things like that. So I think it'd be really, really neat if we could actually understand that by communicating with those animals and those other life forms in a way that we all could understand each other.
Interesting reading the book Sapiens right now and thinking about the importance of mythology and storytelling for Homo sapiens.
Right.
And part of what draws me to the side of this question of I want to speak all human languages is this importance of storytelling to our species, and how many stories we would have access to in a way that we don't see, and it's not obvious to us through other species that this is part of their way of communicating or viewing the world.
Right. It's not obvious to us, but who knows?
But again, it's the a good segment of your argument is we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't. And also,
which is a good point.
Yeah. I also, this goes back to what I said at the beginning of my answer, which is I think humans are important, obviously, and we've had a huge impact on our environment, but maybe if we could communicate with these other things, we'd be more inclined to also want to protect them and to pay more attention to how our actions affect everything else around us, not just other people, because even that we don't pay as much attention to as we probably should. But to the extent that we do it all, we're always focused on how our actions affect other people. And that seems to be the human default to the extent that there is one. And I just don't think we're that important as a species, that we should be, superior to all of the other things around us.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see. Well, I won't even be able to see because I won't be here for it, I don't think. But I'm curious as to what would happen in the development of humankind in terms of, thinking about acceptance and diverse viewpoints and going beyond the tribe, the ethnicity, race, which isn't
Right.
which is something that doesn't even exist really, except in our own minds,
Right.
collective minds, and how many breakthroughs have happened just in terms of trying to have compassion for other human beings, and what that will look like, the new frontiers for that beyond humans.
Right. Totally.
And how long it will take for us to get there.
Yeah, I don't think either of us will actually be alive.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the last question that we ask.
Yes.
How do you feel about cranberries?
Great in scones. Fabulous in scones.
Yes.
And then, of course, a huge part of my Thanksgiving and Christmas meals. So just very traditional. I'm not a huge fan of cranberry juice. I never really got cranberry juice.
Yes.
I mean, they're shiny and beautiful. I like them. I mean, aesthetically, I would say. They're intense, so intense and in your face. But good for you, cranberry, for
well
just
done,
being
cranberry.
Well done, cranberry.
Well done, cranberry.
How do you feel about cranberries?
I think I feel kind of similar. I don't understand cranberry juice, and I never have. But I've also come around to cranberries in general beyond the cranberry sauces at Thanksgiving and Christmas over the years.
Yeah.
And I also agree that they're great in scones, but I also think I've come to appreciate them more, even just as like a berry that you can eat as a berry and not doused in sugar and all the other things that also make it delicious. But I still cannot get behind cranberry juice. I just can't.
I can't either. Yeah. And also, I mean, dried cranberries are okay. I also have this thing about raisins. I love grapes, and why would you take the water out of a grape? That's so sad. They're so refreshing.
Purposes, and they taste different, and that's a totally different thing.
I understand in trail mix and for practical reasons why you would do that. But if I'm given a box of raisins and a bowl of grapes, I'm going to pick grapes.
Sure. I don't disagree with that, but I think there are times when raisins come in handy. They last longer. But I do like dried cranberries. I like them in salads quite a bit.
That's true.
It's a good addition to a salad.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So that
just wraps it up.
We ended on the cranberries.
We ended on the cranberries, as we make all of our contributors do when answering these questions. Yeah. So I'm glad we actually got to sit down and go through the paces. It was fun to put together the questions, and also fun to think about the answers.
Yes, absolutely. So that is this installment of Random Conversations with Sabine and Sivani.
Yes.
But we will be back next week. As always, remember there are campaigns that are actively going on. We've heard from all of the contributors. You've heard us talk about all of these stories as well. And so do contribute to those campaigns. Those campaigns will be ongoing for the duration of this issue. And it's a great way to show your support for the storytellers that are behind the wonderful stories that we got to publish.
Yes, exactly. And we'll see you next week. We'll also see you. We'll hopefully have seen you in your inboxes, because today's the first of the month.
That's right. So you heard from us, and now you get to see us because the internet.
Yeah. And because the internet. And if you're not on the newsletter, this is your moment to sign up for it.
Yes. And if you missed any of those previous videos, they live both on Facebook and on YouTube. So check them out, particularly the article clubs, where we got to sit down with 4 of the 5 contributors. One of our contributors was on a road trip. She was on assignment. So we talked about her story, but we did get to sit down with 4 out of 5. And this is the first time that we've done it that way for the article club. So you get to actually hear from the contributors themselves.
Yes. Yeah. It's such a joy. I'm excited to continue to be in conversation with all these amazing storytellers and journalists in all the different ways that we do it.
That's right.
Facebook Live, and now on the podcast, and the speaker series that's coming up soon. So
definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, everybody. We'll see you